Over the past several months in this year, we've been talking about words from the Word and looking at some concepts that are found within God's Word that are contained within single words. This morning and this evening, we're going to look at two more words. We're going to look at the word lost this morning and the word found tonight. It's very evident in the Scriptures that God has always been very concerned about those who are lost. The unfortunate reality is a lot of people don't realize they're lost. There's been many a time that I've traveled down a road and then all of a sudden realized I am nowhere near where I thought I was and discovered I was lost. Spiritually speaking, it's been the same way. And it's that way for many. And so this morning I want us to really think about what does it mean to be lost? The way that the word is used in the Scriptures, and especially in Luke 15 when we talk about the parable of the Prodigal Son, and that's where we'll be spending our time both this morning and this evening, that word that's used there for lost is not a word that means, oops, I took the wrong direction in life. That, oops, I've made a mistake in life. It means something a whole lot more powerful than that. And we'll be looking at that as we examine the Scriptures. Also, as I was studying through this, thought it was very odd that I had not really ever considered myself to have been found by the Lord. Saved, yes. Found was something that was a lot different. And I hope that's going to be rewarding as you're able to come back this evening. But this morning in Luke chapter 15, when Jesus is leading up to the parable of the prodigal son, it's in the context that the tax collectors and the sinners, those who are well known for their sin, are eating with Jesus, and there are those who are grumbling about this. They're very upset that Jesus is spending time with such people as this. These are people that they would consider undeserving, because not only were they Jewish people such as the tax collectors, but they had betrayed their own people. And these sinners are not just sinners in the fact that we're all sinners, but in the way in which they are well known for the sins they've been committing. And yet Jesus is there in the midst of them. And the reason that he is there is because, as we have in other accounts as well, Jesus often referred to those who are lost as being sick and in need of a physician. These are the ones who are lost that need to be found. These are the ones who are going to be condemned and they need to be rescued. These are the ones that Jesus came to seek and to save. And so why would Jesus not be in the company of them? But he speaks these parables, and you can either look at it as one parable that's in a continuation throughout the chapter, or I tend to look at it as being four parables. You have the parable of the lost sheep, parable of the lost coin, the parable of the prodigal son, and then the real parable that Jesus is getting to, and that's the parable of the older brother, because that's who the Pharisees and those who are grumbling are really directed toward, that you have a problem with the fact that I am with those who need to be saved. And it's in that context that Jesus tells these parables. And so we'll be looking at this morning, especially what it means to be lost like this son was. So if you're ready for your three words, let's see the notebooks held up high this morning. Very good. Okay, your three words, obviously one of them is the word lost. The other two are neglect and attitude. Because as Jesus begins to tell these first two parables in Luke 15, you have the parable of the lost sheep. And a sheep may be lost because of neglect. It may be that there's inattention that's there. That the sheep may have had its head down and was eating its food. Next thing you know, everyone is gone and they're out there by themselves. Or it may be in that the shepherd was not paying close enough attention to this one. And because of that, it had wandered off on its own before it could be corrected and brought back to the fold. But it was lost. You have a woman who has this coin that is lost. And as some commentators put it, it may have very well been a necklace or a crown that a bride would wear on her wedding day that contained these coins. And maybe through neglect, once again, and not paying attention, one of them came loose and rolled into an area where it was lost. And she's going to have to sweep the whole house in order to find it. But for whatever reason, it's lost. And then you have this brother. And as Jesus is talking about through neglect in the first two, these two brothers that are mentioned next are lost for a different reason. And that's because of the reason of attitude. Their attitude was wrong. The younger brother had the wrong attitude, and the older brother had the wrong attitude. The attitude of one caused him to leave his home, to leave his father, to leave everything behind, and to waste all the good that he had. The attitude of the other caused him to be lost because even though he stayed at home, he still gained no benefit from all the blessings that he was living in the midst of. And so either through neglect or attitude, we can be lost, as Jesus is talking about in these parables that we have here. And so first, let's talk about, so what does it actually mean to be lost? The word that's used in the Scriptures most often is the word apolumi, which is used about 100 or so times throughout the Scriptures, in the New Testament rather. And it means to destroy fully, to perish, or to lose. One of the places that it's used in 2 Peter 3 and verse 9, where it talks about the Lord not being slack concerning His promises like some people are. But the Lord is going to be faithful to His promises, and that it's His will that all be saved and that none would perish. The reason that God is long-suffering with us is because He doesn't want any to be lost. He doesn't want to lose any, that they might perish. And so when we see how the word perish is used in this context, this is talking about the destruction of the earth, and that all these things being dissolved with a fervent heat, and that those who perish are those who are going to be spending eternity in hell. So it's not just the idea of perishing, that something has been lost, but I can discard it because it's not really worth anything, and I can get something else in its place. This is the idea of perishing completely, that it is utterly and totally perished, that it has gone away, or it's used in James 4 in verse 12 in the word destroy, that there's only one God, there's only one lawgiver. And this one God, this one lawgiver is the only one who can destroy. And when you think about how God destroys, it is utter, it is completely, it is without anything left over. We think about eternity in hell being that second death that lasts for all eternity. That is the level of destruction that we're talking about. So in the parable of the prodigal son, when this prodigal son comes back home and the father says, "This was my son who was lost," he is saying that he was perished and perishing, that he was destroyed. He was utterly gone. As he also talks about, he was dead. When we talk about being lost, seeking the lost, trying to bring into the fold those who are lost, we have to understand who we're talking about. We're talking about those who have been destroyed by sin, those who are perishing completely. It is the lowest state that a man can possibly be in, is to be lost. There is no more desperate condition that we'll ever have in our life than that condition of being lost. There is no more dreadful thing that a person can go through than going through being lost. And God is concerned, and God is not willing that any be lost. And that's why we have the parable of the lost sheep. Going into the hills, and as we sang a few moments ago, to find even just the one. He does not just count it a loss and discard it and say, well, I've got 99 who are saved. No, he is concerned about the one. He does not want it to be lost. That woman is concerned about that coin, because not only does it have monetary value, but if it is indeed that headdress that a bride would wear, or a necklace that she would wear, then it has great sentimental value as well. And because of that, she does not want it to be lost, and will go through painstaking steps and procedures in order to regain what was lost. It is the very pain of God's heart if any of us are lost. That's why Jesus came. All of heaven itself declares that God wants all to be saved and none to be lost. It is a dreadful word. It is a terrifying word. And brethren, it's a word that so many are going to hear in the last day, that they are lost, and come to a realization that they are lost. And it does not mean you just took a wrong turn. It doesn't just mean that you made a mistake and ended up where you didn't intend. It means you are eternally estranged, spiritually displaced from God Almighty. That's what it means to be lost. And so none of us want to be going through such a thing as that. And it is used, as I said, to describe people who are being separated from God. In Ephesians 2, verses 11 and 12, as I read these verses, think about the words that are used to describe those who are lost. We already know in Ephesians 2, at the beginning, it talks about those who were once spiritually dead. But at the end of this chapter, even notice what it says. Therefore, remember that you, once Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by what is called the circumcision, made in the flesh by hands, that at the time you were without Christ, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. And that is just a few of the descriptive terms that the Bible uses to talk about what it means. There in Luke chapter 15, if you notice verse 32, this is how the Father said it. And notice again the words that he uses. Luke chapter 15 and verse 32. It was right that we should make merry and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found. And so back in verses 15 and 16, what does it mean to be lost? It means just as the brother that you have went and joined yourself to the citizens of this country. You're feeding and wanted to be fed with the things that the pigs are eating. And you're glad to do so because of the level of starvation that you're going through. And tragically, in verse 16, one of the most tragic parts of that story, and no one gave him anything. You think about what this world promises and what this world offers to you. And as this young man no doubt fell prey to, he thought there was so much good out there. There's so much pleasure out there. There was so much opportunity out there for him. And he went out there looking for all these things. But by doing so, he severed the relationship that he had with his father. He tells his father, you are as good as dead in my eyes. Give me my inheritance that I might enjoy it now. I don't want to wait till I earn it. I want to enjoy it now. And he severs his relationship with God. And what did the world do for us? When we did that, when we severed our relationship with God, what did the world give us that was so good in return? What did they offer us that can compare to the things that we had in our Father's house? And if we answer honestly, we know what it was. Nothing. They cannot offer me anything. Why did he do it? Why was the prodigal lost? Let's examine just a few things this morning. One of them is that this prodigal son was very self-centered. He was hungry, he was poor, and he was destitute. And the reason being is because he was self-centered. In Luke chapter 15, notice verses 12 and 13 again, that the younger of them said to his father, give me the portions of good that falls to me. He wanted what was his, and he wanted it now. And it wasn't just about the material things, because when you notice in verse 13, his younger son gathered all together and journeyed into a far country. This was doing what he wanted to do, immediately packing up and leaving home, living his life the way that he wanted to, because obviously he knew what was best for him. And we live in a world that is extremely self-centered. It's always been that way, always will be that way. But sometimes seem to reveal it a lot more than others. And I've got to be honest that this time period that we're living in now, more than any other time that I can remember in my life, I've seen more self-centeredness and arrogant selfishness than I have ever witnessed in my lifetime. I know we're not unique, but it's unique in my lifetime. Just the other day, there was a lady that was before Congress because the world evidently is losing its mind that we may not be able to kill babies anymore. And she is before Congress testifying that abortion was the greatest thing that she ever did. And the quote that she had that really stood out was this: it was the greatest act of self-love I've ever engaged in. The greatest act of self-love. And I got to be honest, she was absolutely right. Because the greatest act of self-love that you can ever do is by murdering another person. That's how important you are. That made that okay. Brethren, we have to be careful about selfishness and about self-centeredness. We talked about pride last week and humility last week, about putting ourselves in the center of the universe and realizing as we need to just how small and insignificant we really are. That there are people who are so self-centered that they will say to their father, I don't need you, I don't want you, but I want what you've got. Give it to me because it is due me, and let me do with it as I see fit. We live in a generation of time, and brethren, we have to be careful when we start looking to ourselves and inwardly to ourselves of having the answer for every problem and situation in the world because we think we know what is best. Jeremiah 10 and verse 23 reveals to us that it is not in man who walks to direct his own steps. We live in a world that tells us that if you want the answers, to look inwardly. Look deep within yourself to find the answers to the problems that you're going through. And what the Bible tells you is that the more you search, the more that you look, and the more that you pursue what is inwardly within you, the more lost you become, and the more confused and filled with doubt your life will be. It is not within man who walks to direct his own steps. That is the way you get lost. Men, how many of us have been told by our wives, why don't you just pull over and ask for directions? I know exactly where I am. I do too. I'm in the car with somebody who doesn't know where they're going, is the answer you get. Because that's what we go through. And too often, spiritually speaking, it's the same way. How often do we beg with others? How much do we beg with the person we're looking at in the mirror? Would you stop and just consult God for the directions? But I know where I'm going. I know how to get where I'm going. I know what I want. I know the direction I need to go in. And God says, would you please just listen to me? He didn't want his father's rules anymore. He didn't want to be under that authority anymore. And he left it all behind to dwell in a foreign country. When we lose God, we lose everything. And we don't see the pain that we cause our Father and others by doing so. And another reason why that happens is because we love material things way too much. And this prodigal son was materialistic as well, that he wanted the property that was due him. And it says that after not many days that he gathered all that he had and went out. I doubt he went out with land in his hand, which he couldn't have had, or probably not the flocks and the animals and all these other things that he could have taken with him. It sounds like he probably took the time to sell all these things and get the money for them so that he could go out there and live it up. One of the things we have to understand about materialism that I think we sometimes miss is this, that materialism is an extremely lazy way of living. That we emphasize a lot that we overwork, we do too much to gain too much, but really what materialism is you're wanting to spend money that you haven't yet earned. You can't make money fast enough to keep up with what it is you're wanting to buy or purchase or have. It's the reason why we have so much debt. I hate debt. And the reason I hate it is because I know what it's done in my life before. I know how horrible it is in the lives of other people that I've seen as well. Debt is something that is a lazy man's disease. Because just like it was with this man here, this young man here, he didn't want to wait until he earned it. He wanted to spend it now. And again, I'm speaking as somebody who has financed hamburgers before. Because that's what you do when you buy a hamburger with a credit card. You're putting a burger on payment plan. Now, if that's not laziness, I don't know what is. If that's not foolishness, I don't know what is. Now, we all understand that there's going to be debts that we're going to incur in life. But brethren, as Christians, we should let those things be very, very minimal for things that we would have to do, not because we're wanting to spend something before we earn it. Mountains of credit card debt. Mountains of it. That if you had that money, instead of spending it on the credit card, you'd be able to pay for things instead. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Isn't that what the scriptures tell us? Go to the ant, you sluggard. And see what it says next? Lays up provision for those future times. He doesn't buy on installment plans. And just as it is with this young man, he wasted everything before he had earned anything. Everything that his father had laid up for him, gone, even before his father passes away and he gets it. How many of our lives have been thrown away because we do such things as that? We throw away everything before we've earned anything. Beware of materialism and understand that it is the lazy way of going about things. The best way to go about things is to earn it, then use it. Because if you earn it first, you will appreciate it more, and you'll probably be a lot wiser about the things you use it for. That's one of the lessons that's hard for us. And again, I know how hard it is. I've been through it as well. And I know how tempting it is because it's so easy. to get, especially in our culture. But it has hurt and damaged so many. In 1 Timothy 6, verses 17 through 19, it's not just the young man who is suffering from this, but you think about it, even the older brother is suffering from this because he's not out there squandering any of it. And so it's real easy for us to come down hard on the person who gets into debt and gets over his head in credit cards and things such as that he does not need. But think about this older brother and how he was very materialistic as well. He didn't waste any of those things, but he was upset that his father had given all these things away, that he was so ungrateful that he had any of them, that he was able to enjoy those things right then. In 1 Timothy 6, neither of them were looking at this. Paul commends those who do have riches to do good and be willing to share. The way that we're going to be judged when it comes to finances, money, materialism, is how do we use them? Do we use those things to enhance the lives of others, or do we only do those things to make ourselves more comfortable? Do we do those things because there's something good that came out of it? Do we lay up a possession for our children and our children's children, as the Bible says is a wise thing to do? Do we support the work of the Lord's body as we're commanded to do? Do we take care of our family, even the extended family if we need to, as the Bible commands? Do we do good with it? Do we share with those who are less fortunate? Do we share with those who are in need so that we may lift them up to a place where they can stand on their own 2 feet? Or do we waste it? Or do we hoard it? It's not just the love of money, but it's also what you do with it that we're going to be judged by. This young man did not say, Father, give me the possession that comes to me that I may do good with it, that I might share with others, that I might enhance the life of others. That's not why he wanted it. The older brother was upset because his father was giving these things away, and he was so ungrateful for what he had that he was able to enjoy himself. Materialism is a very real danger. Also, being hedonistic. Being hedonistic. That means we love pleasure way too much. In Luke chapter 15, 13, and 14, once again, he goes out there and he wastes all of that money. He wasted all of his possessions with this prodigal living or wasteful living. We don't tend to spend money on things we dislike, because most of us would rather spend that money going to a restaurant than going to the dentist, right? We'd rather spend that money on something that I want instead of something that maybe somebody else in the family wants. Hedonism means I do the things that I do because it pleases me. It makes me feel better. And that's what this prodigal son did in following the pleasures of the flesh. And if you look at all three of these things, you can see 1 John 2, 15 through 17 screaming in those three things. All that's in the world, the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the fathers of the world. And you see the pride of life, that he was self-centered. You see the lust of the eyes, and that the materialism and the things that he could see and put his hands on. The lust of the flesh, the pleasures of being hedonistic are there. And Paul warned in 2 Timothy chapter 3 that times were coming that were going to be this way. 2 Timothy chapter 3, and starting at verse 1, Paul says this to Timothy, "But know this, that in the last days perilous times will come, for men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. And what is so sad is that they may have a form of godliness, but they deny its power." And Paul says to turn away from such people. We can pretend to be lovers of God. We can pretend that we still care about God. We can pretend in such a fashion that other people may see it, but we deny there's any power in that godliness. Instead, the power comes through the love of the money, the love of self, and the love of pleasure. Again, Satan has not changed his tactics from the very beginning, and he uses the same thing over and over again. In Luke 16 and verse 13, just one chapter over from where we've been studying, Luke 16 and verse 13, here Jesus says, "No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise other. You cannot love yourself and love God. You cannot love money and serve God. You cannot love pleasure and serve God. You can fill that in with anything that you want to. If it is something that you're trying to serve or love greater than God, it has become an idol, no matter what it is. And we see where it led this young man. This young man is lost. The blessing is this. He's come to the realization. And so now it's a crossroad. What are you going to do? You're going to refuse to admit it, or are you going to go back home? And so the question I'm going to leave with you this morning is this, is the pig pen going to be the final part of your story? We know how this story ends for this young man, and it is something that's so very wonderful. It's a gracious thing that the Lord has taught us in this parable. But the application is this, is where are you this morning? If you find yourself desiring to be fed with the things that this world is feeding itself with, that there's a love and a lust of the flesh, a lust of the eye, and a pride of life that's consuming you. If you're drowning, and know finally where you really are, not where you say you are, not where you pretend to be, but where you really are. If you need help, that's what we're here for. The Lord is gracious, and the Lord is concerned, and the Lord is seeking those who are lost. Will you be found this morning? If we can help you in any way, please come as together we stand and sing this song.